I know you are ready for this journey into the depths of ancient times. Now we will step into the enchanted world of four great historical events that have been lost in the shadows of the past, but have left deep marks on our hearts. Yes, dear viewers, today's adventure will shed light on the complex and fascinating periods of the Middle Ages. Once, in the depths of the Middle Ages, the struggles for the Holy Lands evolved into a grand conflict that engulfed all of Europe and the Middle East. These wars were fought not only for territory but also for beliefs and egos. Now, in the tranquility of listening to this grand tale from the mouth of a sage, we will embark on this legendary journey revolving around four main topics. First, we will delve into the First Crusade and the capture of Jerusalem, one of the most important turning points of the Middle Ages. In this adventure, the bravest knights and kings of Europe set out with the hope of recapturing the holy city of Jerusalem. What challenges did they face, and how did they capture Jerusalem? Next, we will continue with the Second Crusade and Emperor Conrad III. Within the chaos of the Second Crusade, we will explore how Emperor Conrad III played a significant role and how impactful the results of this crusade were. We will consider this section as part of an era shaped not only by wars but also by political and religious tensions. Afterward, we will move on to the rise of the Seljuk Empire and Alp Arslan's victory at Manzikert. The rise of the Seljuk Empire and the Battle of Manzikert are events that profoundly changed the history of the Middle East. How did the balance of power in the region shift after Alp Arslan's great victory? What transpired behind the scenes of this important battle? And finally, we will complete this narrative bridge with the Third Crusade and the Battle of Hattin between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin. In this section, we will deeply examine not only the military but also the cultural and religious impacts of the legendary conflict between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin. Now prepare yourself for this journey into the dusty pages of ancient times, where we will get lost in the depths of history and uncover the truths behind these legendary wars, heroes, and strategies. In a warm and intimate conversation around the fire, we will reveal these stories shining in the darkness of time together. If you're ready, let's begin this deep and compelling journey from the shadows of the past to the present. Let us embark on a profound journey through the dusty roads of time and step into 1,000 years ago, into the complex and fascinating world of the Middle Ages. This period, where the history of two great empires intertwines with war and peace, power and collapse, not only reveals historical events but also shows us the complexity and depth of human history. Our thoughts shift from the glorious days of the Western Roman Empire to its period of decline. The Western Roman Empire was a great power on the stage of history, however. In the 5th century, it grappled with internal and external threats. Long-standing internal strife, political conflicts, and economic issues had shaken the foundations of this great empire. The capital of the Western Roman Empire, Rome, was constantly under attack by barbarian tribes, and the empire's borders were shrinking day by day. The invasions of barbarian tribes weakened Rome's military power. Tribes such as the Visigoths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths plundered Rome's riches, shortening the empire's lifespan. Amid this chaos, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed in 476, marking the official end of the Western Roman Empire. Among the ruins of Rome, echoes of former grandeur could still be heard, but this great empire had now become a part of history. Now let us turn our gaze eastward. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the surviving Eastern Roman Empire came to be known as the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople, as the meeting point of Asia and Europe, became the center of the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire inherited the legacy of Rome and reshaped it with its own characteristics. However, this magnificent city faced significant military and political struggles. At the head of the Byzantine Empire were emperors who gradually became powerful, yet internal turmoil and external threats were a constant menace. The defensive walls of Byzantium were frequently besieged. In the east, they competed with the Sasanians and other Middle Eastern powers. In the west, they fought against various kingdoms that were the heirs of the barbarian tribes. The political intrigues within the Byzantine Empire and the power struggles within the empire made it difficult for them to cope with external threats. Religious and political disputes also played a significant role between the two empires. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Catholic Church gained significant authority in Western Europe. The Pope had become both a spiritual and political power. During this period, conflicts between the Church and kings shaped the political structure of Europe. The Church's influence over the kingdoms grew over time, affecting the balance of power in Europe. On the other hand, the Byzantine Empire was also preoccupied with religious debates in the East. The Orthodox Church was central to Byzantine religious life and frequently had disagreements with the Catholic Church in the West. These tensions between the two churches eventually escalated into a broader conflict, reflected on the historical stage as part of the Crusades. Dear friends, tonight we embark on an epic journey into the depths of history, extending to the Holy Lands. This evening we will witness an impressive story of the most illustrious characters of the Crusades' brave kings and knights. As we listen to the tales poured forth from their pens, swords, and hearts, we will step into the complex and thrilling world of the Middle Ages. The Crusades are a story of brave souls from all over Europe who dedicated themselves to the holy mission commanded by God. Each embarked on this sacred journey with a unique purpose and determination. Let us dive together into the world of these heroes. First, let us turn our attention to one of the leaders of the Crusades, King Baldwin I. Baldwin was the lord of the Duchy of Bouillon, part of French lands, and gathered his courage to join the Crusades. On his journey to seize the Holy Lands of Jerusalem, he achieved great successes alongside his allies, using both his military genius and strategic acumen. He played a crucial role in the capture of Jerusalem, and this great victory immortalized his name in history. Next, we will trace the footsteps of the famous King Philip I of France. Philip, participating in the Crusades, aimed to carry France's pride and influence to the Holy Lands. Under his leadership, the royal forces of France played a significant role in the military strategies of the Crusades. Philip's military intelligence and administrative skills encouraged his allies and highlighted his contribution to the Crusades. Another significant figure is Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire. Emperor Barbarossa is regarded as one of the most impressive leaders of the Crusades. As a powerful military leader, he gathered his army to ensure the success of the campaign. However, tragically, his noble mission came to an end while advancing towards Albania. Barbarossa's death altered the course of the Crusades, and the leaders who succeeded him struggled to maintain the campaign's success. Of course, it is impossible not to mention Richard the Lionheart. The brave and legendary King of England, Richard, was one of the most well-known figures of the Crusades. This king was renowned for his bravery, combat skills, and military strategies. In the struggle to reclaim Jerusalem, he showed great resistance against Saladin. Richard's story stands out not only for his warfare but also for his leadership and determination. In this segment of the Crusades, examining Richard's battle strategies and leadership qualities will help us understand the military dynamics of the era. And of course, we must not forget Godfrey of Bouillon. Coming from the Duchy of Bouillon, Godfrey was one of the leaders who best represented the spirit and purpose of the Crusades. He led the capture of Jerusalem and developed strategies for the city's defense. Godfrey was a figure who reflected the spiritual dimension of the Crusades beyond the battlefield, and his desire to complete this sacred mission left a mark in the history books. These heroes, the kings and knights who joined the Crusades, made their mark on history, not only with their military skills but also with their lofty ideals and sacred ambitions. Their brave hearts, faith, and leadership formed the intricate mosaic of the Middle Ages and led to significant changes in the Holy Lands. Now, following in the footsteps of these heroes, we will continue to delve into the depths of the Crusades and understand these significant historical events more closely. To you, my dear listeners gathered around the fire, be ready to discover more about this sacred journey through history. Ah, yes, we have arrived at the epic story of the Crusader army setting out towards Jerusalem. From the very beginning of their journey, these armies embarked on an adventure full of challenges, aiming to reach the Holy Lands thousands of miles away with the strength of their faith and the guidance of their leaders. But this journey was not merely a voyage, it was also a struggle where faith, endurance, and courage were tested. The Battle of Nicaea, the first major test for the Crusaders. In the spring of 1097, the Crusaders from all over Western Europe set foot in Anatolia. The city of Nicaea, which now stands before us, was the capital of the Turkish Sultan Kilij Arslan I. Kilij Arslan was a young and energetic leader. He had dared to face all kinds of difficulties to solidify his control over Anatolia. However, he had not yet fully grasped the vast power of the Crusaders. When the Crusaders gathered in front of Nicaea, the city was like a fortress with its high walls and defenses. Yet the Crusaders prepared to fight against these walls without yielding. The initial clashes were fierce. The Crusader armies attacked the city walls with all their faith. Kilij Arslan positioned his troops at strategic points to defend the city. However, the Crusaders, with their superior numbers and firepower, pressed against the city's walls. After days of siege, Nicaea fell. But this victory was only the beginning for the Crusaders. The fall of Nicaea opened the way for the Crusaders' advance in Anatolia, but greater challenges awaited them. The Battle of Dorylaeum emerged as the greatest of these challenges. On a hot summer day in 1097, the Crusaders had camped in the Dorylaeum plain. Just as they were breathing easily on this vast plain, the Seljuk army under Kilij Arslan rapidly advanced towards them. The Seljuk army was known for its fast cavalry and archers. They were determined to use these tactics most effectively in Dorylaeum. The Crusaders were caught unprepared by this sudden appearance of the Seljuk army. When the clash began, Seljuk archers rained arrows down on the Crusader ranks. The Crusaders' heavy armor and slow-moving units were quite vulnerable to these rapid attacks. However, here, the leaders of the Crusader army proved themselves as true warriors. Undeterred, they regrouped their armies and launched a counterattack. King Godfrey was a leader with the heart of a lion. He fought at the front lines of the battle and inspired courage in his soldiers. Slowly, they began to repel the Seljuk attacks. Despite all the difficulties, the Crusader army maintained its endurance and forced the Seljuks to retreat. The Battle of Dorylaeum was a great victory for the Crusaders, but this victory came at a heavy cost. Thousands of Crusader soldiers lost their lives in this battle, but this victory further solidified their faith in reaching Jerusalem. Now, the Crusaders knew that reaching the Holy City was not too distant a dream. But this journey was not only about battles. The Crusaders had to contend with hunger, thirst, and disease as they moved through the rugged and challenging roads of Anatolia. At every step, their faith and determination were further tested. Yet, no matter what, the Crusaders had resolved to reach Jerusalem, and this resolve made them unstoppable. By overcoming the powerful defensive line of the Seljuk Empire once again, the Crusaders climbed another crucial step in their arduous journey towards Jerusalem. Jerusalem was still far off, but it was now clearly in the Crusaders' sights. Antioch. This ancient city, which had adorned the dreams of countless warriors and obstructed the paths of many travelers. Antioch had become perhaps one of the most challenging and unforgettable stops of the Crusades. The siege that began in the fall of 1097 became the stage for a truly legendary epic. Now let us delve into the depths of this siege and reconstruct the events step by step before our eyes. On the road to Jerusalem, Antioch stood like a fortress. This city was not only a strategic point but also a grand prize in the eyes of the Crusaders due to its wealth, strong walls, and splendor. The city's walls were surrounded by high and thick barriers. They appeared almost impenetrable to an outsider's eye. However, the Crusaders were determined to breach these walls with the strength of their faith. By the late months of 1097, the Crusader army had arrived at Antioch. The cold breath of winter was beginning to envelop the Anatolian lands. Despite the harsh conditions, the Crusaders did not retreat. They besieged the city and patiently waited for the walls to open. However, this siege was not a matter of a day or a week, but of months. The defenders of Antioch also resisted with determination. The city was managed by the Seljuk commander Yagisiyan, who had organized the city's defense and taken on the role of protecting the fortress behind the walls. The Crusaders tried various tactics to capture the city. Initially, they attempted to cut off any external aid by completely besieging the city. But this was not an easy task. Antioch was one of the largest and best defended cities of the time. During the siege, the Crusaders also had to contend with hunger and thirst. The harsh climatic conditions of Anatolia were beginning to demoralize the Crusaders. However, during these hard days, the leaders among the Crusaders did their best to keep their soldiers united. Each believed that God was with them and motivated their warriors with this faith. Months passed, the siege continued, but the Crusaders struggled to capture the city. In response, one of the Crusader leaders, Bohemond, devised a clever plan. He made a secret agreement with an Armenian guard named Firuz, stationed at a tower on the western side of the city. Firuz promised Bohemond that he could provide an entrance for them into the city. This would become the turning point of the siege. One night, with Firuz's help, a small unit of Crusaders infiltrated the city through this weak point in the walls. The gates were opened from the inside, and the Crusader army managed to enter Antioch. A great chaos ensued in the city. The Crusaders advanced through the streets, clashing with Seljuk soldiers. Yagisiyan attempted to escape but was captured and killed. The fall of Antioch was a great victory for the Crusaders, but the dangers following this victory were also significant. Shortly after the city was captured, the Crusaders found themselves in the midst of another siege. This time, the Seljuk army moved to reclaim Antioch from the Crusaders. The Crusaders seemed trapped within the walls of Antioch. However, their faith gave them strength, even in this difficult situation. Stories spoke of a holy lance circulating among the Crusaders. It was believed to be the lance that pierced Christ's side during the crucifixion. Believing they had found this lance, the Crusaders made a final assault and pushed back the Seljuk army. This victory restored the Crusaders' morale and gave them great courage to continue their advance towards Jerusalem. The Siege of Antioch was not just a military victory for the Crusaders, it was also a testament to their faith, endurance, and strategic intelligence. This siege reinforced the Crusaders' belief in victory and brought them one step closer to Jerusalem. However, it should not be forgotten that these victories came with great sacrifices and hardships. The Crusaders had battled not only with enemies but also with their own fears and weaknesses during this sacred journey. After Antioch, their eyes were now set on Jerusalem, yet many obstacles still lay ahead. Jerusalem. That sacred city, the center of faith and hope. The greatest objective of the Crusades was to restore this city, cherished by all religions for centuries, back under Christian control. By the year 1099, the Crusaders had finally reached the gates of Jerusalem after months of arduous travel. But reaching Jerusalem was just the beginning of this epic tale. The real struggle lay hidden behind the city's walls. After a long and exhausting journey, the Crusaders finally saw the holy city from afar. It was a divine vision rising before their eyes. The immense walls of Jerusalem were the last great obstacle they had to overcome. But this barrier was not going to be easily surmounted. Jerusalem was under the control of Saladin, and the Muslim defenders were resolutely waiting behind the walls. When the Crusaders arrived at Jerusalem, they were exhausted both physically and spiritually. Yet their faith was the strongest weapon keeping them upright. The thought of capturing Jerusalem was a burning flame in every Crusader's heart. Jerusalem was not just a city, it was the key to God's kingdom. Therefore, the Crusaders gathered all their strength and courage and resolved to conquer Jerusalem. The siege began on June 7, 1099. As the Crusaders besieged the city, they envisioned the riches and sacred places of Jerusalem. However, the city's defenses were very strong, and the Muslim commanders did everything they could to keep the Crusaders at bay. The walls of Jerusalem rose like a fortress resisting the Crusaders. The city's water sources were also cut off to weaken the Crusaders. Hunger and thirst were major sources of concern among the Crusaders. Yet these hardships did not break their determination. As the siege dragged on, the morale among the Crusaders began to decline. The heat, thirst, and the enemy's resistance were wearing them down. But at this point, one of the Crusader leaders, Tancred, claimed to have had a dream. He reported that in his dream, Jesus appeared to him and said that victory was near for the Crusaders. This dream created great excitement among the Crusaders. Their faith was renewed, and the warriors continued the siege with new energy. The Crusaders built a massive siege tower to capture the city. This tower was enormous and would allow soldiers to scale the walls. Once the tower was constructed, the Crusaders were ready for the final assault. On July 14th, the tower was moved closer to Jerusalem's walls, and the great attack began. The Crusaders started to climb the walls using the tower. At the height of the battle, the Muslim defenders did everything they could to destroy the tower, but they could not withstand the Crusaders' faith and determination. On July 15th, 1099, the Crusaders breached the walls of Jerusalem and managed to enter the city. This moment is considered one of the greatest victories in history for the Crusaders. When the city was captured, a grand celebration began for the Crusaders. However, this victory came to a bloody end. With the capture of Jerusalem, a massive massacre occurred in the city. The Crusaders wielded their swords to cleanse the city of Muslims, and Jerusalem was washed in blood. History records this day as both a victory and a tragedy. The siege of Jerusalem was the climax of the Crusades. The Crusaders had captured the sacred city, but this victory was achieved through great sacrifices and sufferings. The capture of Jerusalem marked the end of one era and the beginning of a new one for the Crusaders. Jerusalem was now in Christian hands, but this situation heralded new conflicts and wars. As always, Jerusalem remained at the center of faith, hope, and warfare. Ah, Jerusalem! The holy city was the stage for one of history's darkest days. When the Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099, they not only seized a city but also revealed both the triumph of faith and, unfortunately, humanity's darkest side. The moment they breached the city walls, the course of history changed, but this change was a tale of victory written in blood and tears. The capture of Jerusalem signified the realization of a sacred goal for the Crusaders. As they entered through the walls, every corner of the city seemed like the paradise promised to them. Yet this paradise quickly turned into hell. The Crusaders initiated a ruthless massacre of the Muslim and Jewish inhabitants of the city. The streets were awash with blood, and even the holy sites were not spared from this savagery. Historians describe the magnitude of this massacre by noting that there was not enough space in the city for a man to ride his horse, because every place was filled with corpses. This dreadful day went down in history as a painful lesson, showing how noble faith can be, yet also how destructive it can become. With the capture of Jerusalem, the Crusaders set out to establish a new order. When Jerusalem fell under Christian control, a new kingdom was founded on these lands, the Kingdom of Jerusalem. This kingdom became a new fortress, a new hope for the Christian Crusaders in the Middle East. In no time, the Kingdom of Jerusalem emerged as one of the most significant centers of the Christian world. But this kingdom was always under threat, always besieged. The surrounding Muslim states posed a constant danger to this new Christian kingdom. However, the Kingdom of Jerusalem managed to remain standing as the Crusaders' stronghold for a while longer. The massive fortresses, towers, and walls built to protect the city. All were part of this new order that began with the capture of Jerusalem. The capture of Jerusalem not only altered the balance of power in the Middle East, but also left deep marks in Europe. The success of the Crusades caused great excitement in Europe. When this great movement, initiated by Pope Urban II's call, resulted in the capture of the Holy Lands, the Christian world celebrated its victory. However, this victory also marked the beginning of a new era in European societies. The Crusades were not just a religious movement, but also the beginning of an economic and political transformation process. Crusaders from all over Europe brought the riches, cultural heritage, and trade routes of the Middle East to Europe. These campaigns created a new economic and cultural vitality in the Western world. In Europe, the Crusades provided an opportunity for the nobility to acquire new lands and riches. Not only clergymen but also kings, knights, and nobles gained significant benefits from these campaigns. With the capture of Jerusalem, these campaigns led to the strengthening of the feudal structure in Europe and the emergence of a new class. Additionally, it should not be forgotten that the Crusades brought a wave of religious fanaticism to European societies. People reinforced their belief in the power of the Christian world, and this belief reshaped Europe's political map. However, these victories did not only bring wealth and power to European societies. The brutality and massacres of the Crusades also sparked a period of questioning and moral reflection among some intellectuals in Europe. People began to question the violence committed in the name of faith. This process paved the way for the questioning of religious authority in medieval Europe and sowed the seeds for reform movements. The capture of Jerusalem was not just a victory, but also a turning point that shaped the future of Europe. So, dear listener, this is the story of the capture of Jerusalem and the subsequent establishment of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. These events are not just historical moments, but also turning points that changed the fate of humanity. While the capture of Jerusalem is celebrated as a triumph of faith, it also exposed the darkest side of humanity. There is much to be learned from this story, for history shows us not only the past but also the future. Second Crusade. How grandly this campaign began, with such high expectations and great hopes for the reclamation of the Holy Lands. But let me first tell you the story of why and how this campaign started, just as I would to the crowds gathered around the fire in those old days. After the Christian conquest of the Holy Lands, the victory of the First Crusade was met with great enthusiasm in Europe. The Kingdom of Jerusalem was established, and the Crusaders had set up a new order in these sacred lands. However, the harsh climate of the Middle East, the hostile territories, and the ever-increasing Muslim resistance made it difficult for this new order to remain permanent. In the east, the Seljuk Turks and other Muslim states began to take action to reclaim these lands from the Christians. It was under these conditions that the spark for the Second Crusade was lit. The events trace back to the year 1144. That year, the Muslim commander Zengi recaptured Edessa from the Crusaders. Edessa was one of the most important fortified cities guarding the eastern borders of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The fall of Edessa caused a major shock in the Christian world. It was the first serious sign that Christian dominance in the Holy Lands was being shaken. Kings, nobles, and church leaders in Europe watched this situation with deep concern. The loss of Edessa was not merely the fall of a fortress, it was a strong indication that the Crusader presence in the Holy Lands was in danger. Following these developments, Pope Eugene III issued a call to reinvigorate the Christian world. In 1145, he published a decree titled Quantum Predecessors, commanding the initiation of a new crusade. This decree emphasized that the new generation, following in the footsteps of those who organized the First Crusade, should defend the Holy Lands with the same faith. The Pope's call reverberated throughout Europe. However, unlike the First Crusade, this time the call to action involved not only the common people but also kings and nobles. King Louis VII of France and King Conrad III of Germany emerged as leaders spearheading this sacred cause. At the beginning of this campaign, a wave of religious fervor rose across Europe. Sermons were delivered in churches and public squares, and the people vowed with great faith and enthusiasm to join the campaign. However, behind this religious zeal lay political and economic interests as well. Nobles in Europe saw participation in this campaign as a chance to fulfill a religious duty, while also dreaming of new lands and riches. Especially the nobles from France and Germany hoped that joining this campaign would enhance their own prestige and provide new conquests and spoils for their kingdoms. The Second Crusade was also a movement that affected the balance of power in Europe. The kings participating in this campaign aimed not only to undertake a religious mission, but also to enhance their prestige both within their own countries and across Europe. Louis VII and Conrad III, as leaders of the Crusade, planned to demonstrate their power to other European kings and nobles. This campaign was not only a part of a struggle for the Holy Lands, but also a significant piece of the political game on the European stage. Yet the campaign that started with such grand expectations would eventually turn into a tale of disappointments and tragedies. Despite the grand start, the Second Crusade would fail to achieve the desired success due to both leadership issues and the challenging conditions of the Middle East. But before delving into the story of this campaign, it is essential to fully understand the reasons and beginnings of this sacred war. For the failure of this campaign stemmed not only from mistakes in military strategies, but also from the clash of religious, political, and economic interests in Europe. So, dear listener, this is how the beginning and reasons for the Second Crusade unfolded. What drove even the most powerful kings of Europe to this sacred war was not only faith, but also the convergence of great dreams, interests, and ambitions. This story reveals what people are capable of for the sake of their beliefs, but also the complex reasons behind that belief. The tale of the Second Crusade is not just a reflection of a war, but also a glimpse into the conflicts deep within human nature. Emperor Conrad III, that resolute ruler with a strong will. He embarked on a grand preparation to take on the task of defending the eastern borders of the Christian world. But you should know, dear listener, that preparations and plans for such a grand campaign were not limited to merely arming and gathering soldiers. Conrad was setting out on an adventure that would leave a mark on minds, hearts, and lands, and he would do so in full view of all Europe. When Conrad III, the powerful ruler of the German lands, decided to lead the Second Crusade, his decision resounded not just for his own people but for the entire Christian world. This campaign was not just a military operation but a mission to reclaim the Holy Lands and preserve Christian dominion over Jerusalem. However, Conrad required a lengthy and meticulous preparation process to undertake this challenging task. As Emperor Conrad III began preparations for the campaign, enthusiasm was already sweeping across Europe. Many kings, nobles, and common people had sworn to journey to the Holy Lands in response to the Pope's call. However, Conrad would participate in this campaign not merely as a participant but as a leader. The burden on his shoulders was far greater than that of others, for Conrad had to deal with internal issues in Germany while also making the necessary military and logistical preparations for the campaign's success. During the preparations, Conrad's primary goal was to assemble a large and disciplined army. However, this was not just about gathering soldiers. Conrad had to prepare his army for the campaign's hardships. This campaign would be very different from the wars Europe was accustomed to. The harsh and challenging climate of the Middle East, prolonged journeys, and Muslim resistance would pose a significant test for Conrad's army. Therefore, the physical endurance of the soldiers, as well as their morale and motivation, were crucial. Conrad needed to approach his soldiers not just as a commander but also as a leader. Keeping their faith, courage, and loyalty alive was vital for the success of the campaign. One of the greatest challenges Conrad I faced during the preparations was logistical issues. Feeding, housing, and equipping tens of thousands of soldiers for a months-long journey was no small task. Conrad made agreements with various European nobles and those who controlled trade routes to meet the needs of this large army. He tried to anticipate the difficulties the army would face during the journey and developed plans for strategically important points. However, as you know, dear listener, no plan aligns perfectly with the realities of war and campaign. Although Conrad wanted everything to work out perfectly, he had to be prepared for the uncertainties of fate and conflict. Conrad I also did not neglect diplomatic preparations. He worked to form alliances and develop friendly relations with the rulers of the lands through which the campaign would pass. He knew that without friendly relations, the long journey would become even more challenging. Meetings with Byzantine Emperor Manuel I Komnenos were crucial for the success of the campaign. Byzantium, as the heir to the Eastern Roman Empire, was a strategic transit point for the Crusader armies. Therefore, Conrad made sure to maintain close relations with Manuel Komnenos and cooperate on mutual interests. However, history shows us that these alliances do not always go as expected. Emperor Conrad would face powers that could be both allies and adversaries in this campaign. During these preparations, Conrad not only mobilized an army but also dedicated his own spirit to this holy mission. For this campaign was not just about gaining territory or achieving victory. Conrad and other Crusader leaders believed they were fulfilling God's will by participating in this campaign. Conrad felt the heavy responsibility of being part of this sacred cause. Failure of the campaign would mean not only a military defeat but also a blow to the faith of the Christian world. Therefore, Conrad meticulously planned each stage of the campaign, prayed, and hoped to achieve victory with God's help. Dear listener, this is how Conrad I's preparations and plans for the campaign took shape. But you should know that no matter how meticulous and detailed these preparations were, the brutal realities of war are always filled with unexpected events. Emperor Conrad knew he was facing a significant test, both physically and spiritually, as he embarked on this challenging journey. And in the continuation of this story, we will explore the difficulties this great ruler encountered, how the campaign unfolded, and its outcomes. The early stages of the Crusade. This is when one of the most dramatic and bloody chapters of history was opened. During this period, thousands of Christians who set out to reclaim the Holy Lands found themselves facing unexpected challenges. But you should know, dear listener, that the initial stages of this campaign were not only a time of clashing swords but also a period of clashing beliefs and ideals. In the spring of 1096, thousands of Christians, responding to Pope Urban II's call, began the campaign. These people, coming from all corners of Europe, had united to reclaim the Holy Lands from the Muslims. However, the first phase of this grand campaign began with a long and arduous journey from Europe to the east. This journey was a significant test both physically and spiritually. The Crusader armies were composed of different nations, languages, and cultures. This could make them strong, but it could also make them weak. Bringing such a diverse army together towards a common goal was not easy. However, the Crusaders believed that God had brought them together for this sacred mission, and this belief was their greatest source of motivation. As the armies advanced eastward, they faced many challenges along the way. Hunger, thirst, diseases, and enemy attacks were the greatest threats the Crusader armies faced. Nevertheless, they continued their journey with determination to reach Jerusalem. The first phase of the crusade began with several main armies setting out under different leaders. One of the most significant of these armies was led by the French leader Raymond IV. This army was more organized and disciplined compared to others. However, this did not mean they would not face difficulties during their journey. The Crusader armies encountered occasional conflicts with the local population as they passed through Byzantine lands. These conflicts both slowed the Crusaders' progress and strained relations with the Byzantines. Despite these challenges, the Crusaders continued on their path. One of the first major battles occurred in Anatolia. The Crusader armies, encountering the Seljuk Turks in Nicaea, faced strong resistance. The Seljuk army mounted a superior defense against the Crusaders, which proved to be a major test. However, the Crusaders, fueled by the strength of their faith, won this battle and captured Nicaea. This victory boosted the morale of the Crusader armies and further motivated them on their way to Jerusalem. Yet the challenges that followed this victory highlighted once again how arduous the journey was. After the victory at Nicaea, the Crusader armies advanced towards Dorylaeum. Here, they faced another major clash with the Seljuk army. The Battle of Dorylaeum was a turning point for the Crusaders. It was one of the greatest resistances the Crusaders encountered in Anatolia. The Seljuk army employed a superior strategy and launched a powerful attack that nearly destroyed the Crusaders. Yet, the Crusaders drew strength from their faith in God and won this difficult battle as well. This victory accelerated the Crusaders' progress in Anatolia and brought them a step closer to Jerusalem. But dear listener, these battles were not merely military victories. The Crusader armies suffered many losses during these battles. Thousands of soldiers lost their lives on this grueling journey. However, their faith and desire to reclaim the Holy Lands continued to motivate the survivors. For this campaign was not just a war but also a spiritual journey. The Crusaders faced not only their enemies but also their internal struggles. After the Battle of Dorylaeum, the Crusader armies continued to advance deeper into Anatolia. This advance took them as far as Antioch. But this was only the first phase of the campaign. The real challenges awaited them as they approached the Holy Lands. The road to Jerusalem was paved with blood, tears, and faith, and the Crusader armies would face many more trials on this difficult journey. And so, dear listener, the early stages and battles of the Crusade form one of the most dramatic and tragic events in history. Each phase of this campaign holds great significance, not only for the Crusaders but also for world history. For this campaign was not just a military operation but a period when beliefs, ideals, and the human spirit were tested. And in the continuation of this story, we will explore how this grand campaign unfolded and how victories and defeats were experienced. Dear listeners, I will now take you into the depths of history, to the tragic and instructive period of the Second Crusade. In this era, you will see how the hopes of armies that set out with great dreams were shattered in lands filled with hardships. This story not only reveals the harsh face of history, but also exposes the weaknesses of human nature. Conrad I was one of the greatest Christian rulers who embarked on the mission to reclaim the Holy Lands from the Muslims. As the Emperor of Germany, he took on the leadership of the Second Crusade and dedicated his army to this sacred cause. However, dear friends, you should know that this campaign would turn out to be a journey filled not with victories but with disappointments for him. Conrad I's army set out with great grandeur. This powerful force, coming from all corners of Europe, initially advanced with great confidence. However, as they began to face the real challenges of the campaign, this confidence gave way to anxiety and fear. The harsh geography of Anatolia greatly slowed the army's progress. Soldiers, scorched under the hot desert sun, had to struggle with thirst and hunger. During the journey, diseases and enemy attacks severely weakened Conrad's army. One of the most dramatic moments of the campaign was when Conrad II's army was ambushed by the Seljuk Turks. This attack led to the destruction of a significant portion of the army. The tragedy on the battlefield not only demoralized the soldiers but also Conrad I himself. It was at that moment that he realized for the first time that the campaign was likely to end in failure. Having lost a large part of his army, Conrad decided to retreat in deep disappointment. This retreat would become one of the greatest defeats in his military career. Conrad II's failures in this campaign resonated widely across Europe. This was the exact opposite of the victory that the Christian world hoped to achieve against the Muslims. The failure of the campaign in Europe was seen not only as a military defeat, but also as a spiritual loss for Christianity. This situation led to great disappointment and despair in Europe. The efforts of the Crusader armies to reclaim the Holy Lands had once again ended in vain. However, dear friends, the consequences of the Second Crusade were not limited to this defeat. The campaign also had a profound impact on Europe's political and religious landscape. The defeat shook the faith in the Crusades, creating deep distrust among the kings and leaders of Europe. During this period, the power struggle between clergy and monarchs in Europe intensified. The leaders of the Christian world, shifting the blame for the defeat onto each other, engaged in significant conflicts among themselves. This situation increased political instability in Europe and made the future of the Crusades uncertain. The failure of the campaign also had deep effects on the ordinary people in Europe. These people had joined the Crusades with great hopes, sacrificing their families and loved ones for this sacred cause. However, the stories told by the returning soldiers exposed how dreadful and unsuccessful the campaign had been. Trust in the Crusades among the public diminished, and many began to question the true value of these campaigns. This situation led to a weakening of religious faith in Europe and a questioning of the authority of Christianity. In conclusion, the Second Crusade was a significant failure and disappointment for Europe. Conrad II's failures in the campaign delivered a severe blow, not only to his military career but also to Europe's faith in the Crusades. This campaign remains one of the most dramatic and tragic periods in history. But dear listeners, remember that this story is not just a tale of defeat, but also a reflection of the struggle of human nature to cope with challenges. And this struggle will continue to echo through the depths of the human spirit in every era of history. Dear listeners, I will now take you out of the mists of time and bring you to the early days of the Seljuk Empire, a period that left a significant mark on the stage of history. As a witness to that era, I will vividly recreate for you how this great state was born, how it grew stronger, and how it changed the course of history. History is filled with the epics of powerful leaders and the devoted peoples who stood behind them. The Seljuk Empire is the result of such an epic. The roots of this epic reach back to the vast steppes of Central Asia. In the harsh climate of the steppes, nomadic Turkish tribes, who learned to survive, would eventually come together to lay the foundation of a great state. The story of the Seljuk Empire actually dates back to very ancient times. Among the Oghuz Turks, a strong and courageous Turkish tribe in Central Asia, Seljuk Beg is the person who sowed the first seeds of the empire. Under the leadership of Seljuk Beg, this tribe was known for its warrior skills, endurance, and love of freedom. However, Seljuk Beg's greatest trait was his foresight. He was not only leading his tribe to survive, but also with the ideal of establishing a great state that would change the course of history. In his youth, Seljuk Beg gained fame as a great warrior. However, his real achievement was his ability to keep his tribe together in the challenging geography of Central Asia. Surviving in the steppes required not only physical endurance but also strategic intelligence. Seljuk Beg organized his tribe with discipline and united them around a single goal to move westward and conquer new lands. Under Seljuk Beg's leadership, the Oghuz tribes began to migrate gradually towards the west of Central Asia. This migration was not just a relocation but also a process of cultural change. Seljuk Beg had witnessed the rise of the Islamic world and decided to adopt this new religion. This decision was not only a religious transformation but also a political move. Islam, at that time, was a rapidly spreading and powerful belief system. By adopting this religion, Seljuk Beg hoped to find a strong ally in the Islamic world. After Seljuk Beg's death, his sons took over the leadership. During this period, the Seljuk family achieved great political success and became a rapidly expanding power in Western Asia. The swift rise of the Seljuk family made them one of the most powerful states in the Islamic world in a short time. However, this success was achieved not only through military might but also through strategic marriages, alliances, and diplomatic maneuvers. The real founder of the Seljuk Empire, Tugrul Beg, became the most important leader of the Seljuk family during this period. Tugrul Beg transformed the Seljuk state from a small tribe into a large empire. Among his greatest successes was the alliance he established with the Abbasid Caliph. By entering Baghdad, Tugrul Beg freed the Caliph from the pressure of the Shia Abids and was granted the title of Sultan of the East and the West by the Caliph. This title solidified the place of the Seljuk Empire in the Islamic world and made it one of the most powerful states of the Middle Ages. Under Tugrul Beg's leadership, the Seljuk Empire began to expand rapidly. The Seljuk armies, advancing towards Anatolia, encountered the Byzantine Empire there. This encounter led to the Battle of Manzikert, one of the greatest battles in history. This battle would determine not only the fate of the Seljuk Empire but also the future of Anatolia. The rapid rise of the Seljuk Empire was supported not only by military victories but also by cultural and scientific developments. The Seljuks contributed to the spread of science and education in the Islamic world by establishing great madrasas. The scholars trained in these madrasas became some of the most important scientists and thinkers in the Islamic world. Additionally, the Seljuk Empire's emphasis on art and architecture led to the construction of some of the most magnificent buildings of the era. The Friday Mosque in Isfahan is one of the most significant works of this period and is considered one of the finest examples of Seljuk architecture. The early period of the Seljuk Empire was a time filled not only with military successes, but also with political and cultural developments. During this period, the Seljuks became one of the most powerful states in the Middle East and gained great respect in the Islamic world. However, dear listeners, remember that these successes were achieved through great sacrifices and challenges. The early period of the Seljuk Empire was one of the most challenging and harsh periods in history, and the events of this time determined the fate of not only the Seljuk Empire but the entire Middle East. In conclusion, the foundation and early period of the Seljuk Empire marked the beginning of a great epic. This period symbolizes not only the birth of a state but also of a civilization. The Seljuks, through their achievements in this period, have inscribed their names in history with golden letters. However, this story does not end here, dear listeners. There are many more adventures and victories of the Seljuk Empire to tell. We will continue to narrate the rise of this great state and its impact on the stage of history. Dear listeners, now, I will take you deep into history, to the captivating times when the Seljuk state first stepped into Anatolian lands and the legendary Alp Arslan prepared for the Battle of Manzikert. This is a story of a process that changed the fate of a nation, rewriting not only the history of Anatolia but of the entire Islamic world. As if I were a sage who lived through those days, I will continue to narrate every moment, every detail. The Seljuk state, rising from the vast steppes of Central Asia, was eager to extend its power and might to the west. The leaders of this great state were brave warriors forged in the harsh conditions of Central Asia. But now their eyes were set on a greater prize, Anatolia. Anatolia, under the dominion of the Byzantine Empire at that time, was an attractive target for the Seljuks with its rich lands, strategic importance, and fertile fields. The Seljuks were not just seeking a new homeland, they also aimed to conquer the most important fortress of the Islamic world in the west. The Seljuk ruler Alp Arslan was on the verge of achieving this great goal. He was known not only as a brave warrior but also as a strategic genius. Under Alp Arslan's leadership, the Seljuk armies were both resisting the Byzantines and trying to explore Anatolia and unite the people under Seljuk rule. Alp Arslan knew that the key to unlocking Anatolia lay in Manzikert. Therefore, he began preparations with great determination. While moving his army towards Manzikert, Alp Arslan encountered many difficulties along the way. However, each challenge further solidified his resolve. As his army traversed the mountains and valleys of Anatolia, they battled the harsh natural conditions. Under the hot sun, the soldiers sometimes struggled to find water and food. But Alp Arslan continuously motivated his army, reminding them of the importance of this campaign. As a great leader, he approached his soldiers not just as a commander but also as a father. He frequently spoke to them to keep their morale high and explained how the conquest of Anatolia would be a great victory for the Islamic world. As they neared Manzikert, Alp Arslan's plans became clearer. He knew that Byzantine Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes was advancing towards Manzikert with a large army. This situation posed a significant threat to the Seljuk army. However, Alp Arslan was never daunted. His strategy was to weaken the Byzantine army and deprive them of regional advantages. Thus, he carefully positioned his army and devised clever plans to lure the Byzantine army into a trap. The Battle of Manzikert is remembered as one of the greatest battles in history. This battle was not just a clash between two armies but also a confrontation between two great cultures and two great faiths. Alp Arslan knew that winning this battle would mean not only a military victory, but also the rise of a civilization. He told his soldiers that with God's permission, victory would be theirs. When the battle began, the Seljuk army showed incredible resistance against the Byzantines. The traps cleverly set by Alp Arslan began to break the power of the Byzantine army. The Seljuk soldiers fought with remarkable courage against a numerically superior Byzantine force. Each soldier was aware that this battle would determine not only their own fate but also the fate of the entire Islamic world. In the end, Alp Arslan's strategy resulted in victory. The Byzantine army was defeated, and Romanos IV Diogenes was captured. This victory opened the doors for not only the Seljuk state but also for Anatolia to become a part of the Islamic world. The Battle of Manzikert ensured the permanent presence of Turks in Anatolia and became one of the greatest achievements of the Seljuk state. Following this victory, the Seljuks quickly began to settle in Anatolia and infuse these lands with Islamic culture. Under Alp Arslan's leadership, the Seljuk state extended its dominance throughout Anatolia. These lands had now become a part of the Islamic world, and the Seljuk state, by establishing a powerful state in these lands, had become the greatest power in Western Asia. Dear listeners, the entry of the Seljuk state into Anatolia and Alp Arslan's preparation for the Battle of Manzikert is not just a military operation but an epic that changed the fate of a nation. This epic has been written in golden letters in the pages of history and has demonstrated the power and might of the Seljuk Empire to the world. Alp Arslan and his valiant soldiers did not only win a victory in these lands but also ensured that Anatolia became Turkish homeland. For this reason, the great victory of the Seljuk Empire will always be remembered throughout history and will be regarded as one of the cornerstones that ensured Anatolia remained Turkish territory. Dear listeners, now, I will take you on a journey to one of the most fascinating moments in history, the Battle of Manzikert, and the impact of this tremendous battle on Anatolia and the Seljuk state. This will be a story of the Seljuk state's great victory, the transformation of Anatolia's destiny, and a fundamental shift in the course of history. The Battle of Manzikert took place in 1071 under the leadership of one of the greatest military leaders of the time, Alp Arslan. Alp Arslan was a clever strategist, a brave warrior, and a just ruler. His army was composed of soldiers trained in the harsh conditions of Central Asia, skilled in the art of war, devout and determined. However, the victory was achieved not only through brave soldiers but also through an excellent strategy and deep foresight. The preparations for the battle were a period where every detail was meticulously planned. When Alp Arslan learned that Byzantine Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes was advancing into Anatolia, he decided to further strengthen his strategic position at Manzikert. He planned to use the natural advantages of the mountainous terrain against a large army. the Seljuk army aimed to encircle the enemy and neutralize them on the battlefield by using the mountainous areas and valleys around Manzikert. During the preparation phase of the battle, Alp Arslan's army was made ready both physically and psychologically. Alp Arslan continuously boosted the morale of his soldiers, making them feel that he was not just a warrior but also a leader and guide. His leadership gave strength and encouragement to his soldiers during the most critical moments of the battle. The mountains and valleys of Manzikert perfectly supported the Seljuk soldiers' plan to trap the enemy. On the day the battle broke out, the Seljuk army shocked the Byzantine forces with multi-directional attacks. Alp Arslan's plan was to first trap the enemy in the mountainous regions and neutralize them. This strategy allowed the Seljuk soldiers to achieve both strategic and tactical superiority. The Byzantine army was left vulnerable to the sudden and effective attacks of the Seljuk soldiers. The most critical moment of the battle began when the Seljuk soldiers breached the central lines of the Byzantine army. This moment marked a turning point that changed the course of history. The Seljuk army defeated the enemy both numerically and strategically, securing victory. Alp Arslan's clever plans and the sacrifices of his brave soldiers made the Battle of Manzikert possible. Immediately after the Battle of Manzikert, the fate of Anatolia underwent a significant transformation. The Seljuk state rapidly began to settle in Anatolia following the victory. This victory solidified the Seljuk dominance in Anatolia and paved the way for the unification of many Turkish tribes in the region. The permanent settlement of the Seljuk state in Anatolia accelerated the spread of Islamic culture in the region and laid the foundation for these lands to become Turkish territory. Following the victory, under Alp Arslan's leadership, the Seljuk state established a strong administration in Anatolia. Alp Arslan effectively used the prestige gained from the victory to expand the borders of the Seljuk state both internally and externally. The Battle of Manzikert increased the power and influence of the Seljuk state and laid the foundation for its long-term dominance in Anatolia. The conquest of Anatolia held great significance not only for the Seljuk state but also for the entire Islamic world. This victory expanded the western borders of the Islamic world and ensured that Anatolia became an integral part of Islamic culture. The success of the Seljuk state in Anatolia altered the power dynamics both in the region and across the Islamic world. The Battle of Manzikert is remembered as a victory written in golden letters in history books. This victory was not just a military success, but also a symbol of the Seljuk state's permanent dominance in Anatolia and the rooting of Turkish culture in these lands. Alp Arslan and his valiant soldiers changed the course of history with this victory and rewrote the destiny of Anatolia. Dear listeners, the occurrence of the Battle of Manzikert and the effects of this great battle on Anatolia and the Seljuk state are an unforgettable epic etched in the depths of history. While narrating this epic, I hope to take you to these magnificent moments in history and deepen your understanding of the Seljuk state's power and the importance of Anatolia becoming Turkish territory. Dear friends, now I want to take you on a journey to another significant event in history, the beginning of the Third Crusade and the reasons behind it. This period represents one of the most turbulent times of the Middle Ages, a complex and profound era of the Crusades. Everything about this corner of history is filled with wars, intrigues, and the complexities of idealism. The Third Crusade began in 1189. The reasons behind this crusade were not just religious ideals but also personal and political reckonings. Let's first look at the background of this crusade. Saladin's recapture of Jerusalem in 1187 had caused a major upheaval in the Christian world of Western Europe. The fall of Jerusalem incited great anger among the kings and nobles of Western Europe. Jerusalem was a sacred city for Christians, and its loss was not only a religious blow but also a strike against the prestige of the Christian world. The loss of Jerusalem led Christian communities in Western Europe to mobilize to reclaim the Holy City. One of the first to take steps to initiate the Third Crusade was Emperor Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire. Barbarossa was one of the most powerful rulers in Europe and assembled a large army to retake Jerusalem. However, his journey was not only a religious mission but also aimed at increasing his personal prestige and political influence. In addition to Barbarossa, King Richard the Lionheart of England and King Philip Augustus of France were also preparing for the crusade. Richard and Philip were acting with great enthusiasm and determination to reclaim Jerusalem. The relationship between these two kings was complex. They were both allies and rivals with personal competition. Richard burned with the desire to be the hero of the war, while Philip aimed to enhance France's prestige. The initiation of the Third Crusade was not just a major military campaign, but also a complex diplomatic and political struggle. Various European kings and nobles joined the crusade to protect their own interests and reinforce their sovereignty. The religious aspect of the crusade was intertwined with the personal and political calculations of the rulers and nobles. The preparations for the war were conducted with great meticulousness. Armies, battle strategies, supplies, and logistical plans were thoroughly worked out. Each leader did their best to keep their army's morale high and prepare them for battle. While Barbarossa trained his army with strict discipline, Richard and Philip developed various strategies to prepare their own forces. However, various challenges arose during the planning and preparation of the crusade. King Barbarossa faced difficulties on his way to the Middle East and had to manage these challenges. Barbarossa made a tremendous effort to keep his army on the road, supply them, and guide them. These challenges were just a part of the difficulties faced at the beginning of the crusade. Richard and Philip's participation in the crusade was also filled with their internal struggles. Richard had to defend his throne in England and deal with French rivals, while Philip had to maintain the internal political balance in France. The personal and political objectives of these two leaders significantly influenced the course of the crusade. In conclusion, the Third Crusade was a complex campaign shaped by both religious and political reasons. This grand effort to reclaim Jerusalem was not only a military campaign but also deeply affected the political and religious dynamics of Europe. The challenges, strategies, and struggles of the leaders during this initial phase of the crusade laid the foundation for one of the most significant events in history. Dear listeners, our exploration of the beginning and reasons for the Third Crusade has been a journey into the depths of this historical period. Understanding the motivations, personal and political reckonings behind this great campaign provides a crucial window into the complex and fascinating world of the Middle Ages. Dear friends, now I want to take you to a period where some of history's greatest military minds and strategies intersected. In this section, we'll explore Richard the Lionheart's role and strategies during the Crusades, as well as Saladin's preparations for the Battle of Hattin. These pivotal moments in history represent the pinnacle of military leadership and strategic thinking. When Richard the Lionheart set out for the Third Crusade in 1189, he faced a monumental challenge. His efforts to recapture Jerusalem left a deep impact on both his allies and enemies through his military strategies and leadership skills. In the early stages of the war, Richard displayed strategic brilliance. He first took on the mission to besiege Acre. Acre was a crucial port city for the Crusaders and one of the military and commercial hubs of the Middle East. Richard's determination and military genius in managing the siege effectively solidified the Crusader army's strategic advantage in the region. His military acumen played a significant role in breaching the city's walls and breaking its defenses. One of the most notable aspects of Richard's military strategies was his effective coordination of naval and land operations. The Mediterranean operations increased the Crusaders' freedom of movement and secured supply lines. Richard targeted the enemy's strategic points, aiming to maximize the Crusader army's battlefield advantage. However, much work remained to be done to reclaim Jerusalem, and at this point, Saladin's preparations were of great importance. Saladin, in preparing for the Battle of Hattin, elevated his strategic and military intelligence to the highest level. His preparations for this battle demonstrated his military leadership and strategic thinking abilities. The preparation process for the Battle of Hattin was a critical juncture for Saladin. He prepared his army not only physically but also spiritually. This battle was not just a military conflict but also a struggle of faith. Saladin continually provided spiritual support to keep his army's morale high. Saladin's strategic preparations required deep knowledge and analysis of his enemies. He meticulously researched to identify the Crusaders' weaknesses and strategic errors. he developed all the necessary military tactics and strategies to defend Jerusalem. During this process, he made detailed plans to make the most of Hatton's geographical features. Saladin maintained the highest level of military training and discipline for his army. Additionally, he controlled strategically important locations and passes in the region to restrict the Crusaders' movements. Saladin anticipated potential obstacles and threats during the enemy's campaign and shaped his plans accordingly. In the lead up to the Battle of Hattin, Saladin's strategic moves aimed to undermine the Crusader army's morale and gain supremacy on the battlefield. We witnessed how Saladin used all his military skills and leadership abilities to turn the tide of the battle in his favor. Richard the Lionheart and Saladin both experienced the zenith of military strategies and leadership at this historical turning point. Both leaders faced the complexities and challenges of war, leaving their mark on history with their exceptional achievements. Richard's strategic skills during the Crusades and Saladin's preparation for the Battle of Hattin are of great importance in military history, and both leaders have firmly cemented their place in history. Dear friends, the stories of these great historical figures provide a profound lesson in courage, strategy, and leadership. My dear friends, now I will take you to one of the greatest and most thrilling moments in history, the Battle of Hattin. This battle is not only a pinnacle of military strategies, but also a peak of faith and determination. It is the year 1187, and we are on the brink of a battle that will shape the fate of the greatest empires of that time. The Battle of Hattin is etched in history as a conflict between Saladin and the Crusaders that determined the future of the Middle East. Many events and strategies that set the stage for this battle transformed into a great struggle that continues to impact us today. Let us delve into the origins and outcomes of this grand conflict together. After Saladin completed all his preparations to display great strategic mastery at the Battle of Hattin, he was eager to face the Crusader army. Saladin had devised clever plans to narrow the enemy's maneuvering space. While preparing his army, he did not overlook the importance of psychological warfare alongside military strategies. The Crusaders developed various tactics to weaken the army by exerting pressure on its morale and resilience. And finally, on July 4th, 1187, the battle erupted at Hattin. Saladin managed to pressure the Crusaders both physically and psychologically, pushing them into a difficult situation. When the Crusaders arrived at the battlefield after a long march, they were exhausted, hungry, and thirsty. This was one of Saladin's greatest advantages. The strategic dominance over water sources was a key factor in Saladin's victory. In the early hours of the battle, the internal turmoil and morale issues of the Crusader army further increased Saladin's advantage. Saladin's clever tactics, combined with the enemy's uncoordinated attacks, led to heavy losses for the Crusaders. During this period, Saladin's leadership and military strategies became almost legendary. As the Battle of Hattin progressed, the Crusaders were left nearly surrounded and trapped. Saladin, by keeping his army constantly on the move and strictly following the Crusaders' surrender terms, ensured the complete weakening of the enemy. This battle became not just a military clash, but also a demonstration of strategic brilliance. Saladin calculated every move of the enemy, providing himself with perfect superiority. And then, as the evening of July 4th approached, the battle came to an end for the Crusaders. Saladin's victory opened the gates of Jerusalem to him. The results of the Battle of Hattin profoundly altered the political and religious balances of the Middle East. A significant portion of the Crusaders were captured or killed, and Saladin's victory was recognized as both a testament to his military prowess and a historical turning point. After this victory, Saladin reclaimed Jerusalem from the Crusaders, and the city remained under Muslim control for a long period. The fall of Jerusalem was a major blow to the Crusaders, and this event significantly influenced the course of the Crusades. Saladin's recapture of Jerusalem was seen not only as a military triumph but also as a spiritual victory. This victory enhanced his prestige in the Middle East and solidified his place in history. Dear friends, the story of the Battle of Hattin demonstrates not just a military conflict but also highlights how important faith, strategy, and leadership are. Saladin's great victory is a monumental achievement that changed the course of history both militarily and spiritually. These events remind us of the value of courage, determination, and strategic thinking. The grand moments of history, with their lived experiences and lessons, offer us an unforgettable tale. My dear friends, we have now reached the end of some of the great moments throughout history. Today we witnessed the most significant and impactful events of the Middle Ages. We explored the dynamics of the Crusades, Saladin's courageous victories, and the historical echoes of these events together. Have you ever thought about how the wars and strategic maneuvers made in these lands centuries ago affected not only that era but also our lives today? Now we embarked on a journey into the depths of the past, taking a tour through the complex and colorful world of those times. We examined every moment from the beginning of the Crusades to Saladin's recapture of Jerusalem. Each event became a significant cornerstone that changed the course of history, and these stones shaped the current world order. The fall of Jerusalem and the subsequent victory of Saladin were not only military successes but also the highest expressions of faith and will. The kings, knights, and leaders of that time made great sacrifices to protect their lands and beliefs. By understanding these great historical events, we can grasp what these monumental struggles throughout history have taught us. Throughout this historical journey, we encountered the stories of leaders and warriors who inspired us with their strategic brilliance. Each step, each struggle, served as a light from the depths of the past, showing us that history is not just a period of time, but also a significant part of human history. Dear friends, history is a teacher. It shows us the traces of the past, tells us which paths were tried and which mistakes were made. Behind every great event lies a story, and these stories tell us what we should do and what we should avoid. Instead of getting lost in the dusty pages of history, extracting lessons from them and guiding the future is true wisdom. Now, I hope you understand these great historical events and consider both the richness of history and our shared human heritage as you carry this knowledge into the future. History is not just a past, but also a guide. Every lesson you draw from its depths will be a light in your future journeys. Thank you for watching our video, dear friends. I have greatly enjoyed exploring the great moments and heroes of the past with you. I extend my sincere thanks for being a part of our historical journey. With the hope of embarking on a new journey into another fascinating period of history in our next video, farewell for now. Do not get lost in the depths of history. Let us move forward together on the path of wisdom and learning.